So welcome to Organising Ideas, Tips and Tricks for Researchers. My name's Lynn Lavery and I'm the Director of Academic Consulting. I can see by the attendance list that many of you will have met me in other contexts, most probably an in vivo workshop. So you might be wondering why on earth I'm presenting a session on this particular topic. So just to shed some light on that, my PhD research investigated self-regulated learning, and part of that was around methods for processing and managing information and ideas. So some of today's tips actually come from my PhD research. Others are strategies or applications that I now use as part of managing my own work and research. So today's session is about organising both your ideas and your information. So it's essentially tips for surviving in a world where we're constantly information overloaded. My plan is to start out with demonstrating the 4 applications that I'll be covering today. So those 4 are Evernote, Trello, Zotero and Xmind. And when we cover Xmind, I'll also be discussing visual mapping just very, very briefly. And I'll also be briefly mentioning something called Mohio Map, which I always have trouble pronouncing for some reason. If we have any time after the end of the 4 demonstrations, I have a few final tips as well. I suspect we won't get to those, but I have left them in the slides for you just so you didn't miss out on the information. So that is the plan for today's session. So let's get cracking with the content. So as I've just mentioned, there are 4 applications that I will be demonstrating today. They're not the only options for organising your information and ideas. And later in the session, I will open the floor up to any other suggestions people might have. I'm sure there's a few of you attending today that probably have other alternatives that you use. But these are the 4 I've decided. They're 4 that I use regularly and that I find really helpful for the tasks that you see in that second column. Now, part of my purpose for having this table here is to try and preempt some of the questions that you might have today, because I suspect as I introduce each one, there's going to be questions like, where do I sign up for it? Does it cost? Can I get it available for the Mac? So I've tried to sort of cover off most of the questions you will probably have. I think the information on that slide is relatively self-explanatory, so I'm going to leave you to have that just as a reference. The only thing I did want to explain was what freemium means, just in case anyone's not familiar with that term. Freemium means it's a free application, but you do need to pay for additional features. So the free version isn't fully functional, but you can pay extra to get that additional functionality. Now, just a few other notes before I leave this slide. You might be wondering why I've included Trello and Zotero. Evernote, obviously, I've got as for information management and Xmind for idea management. But why have I included task management and literature management there as well? So the reason for that is that ideas often need to be converted into tasks, and Trello is also useful for idea management. And literature is a type of information that we have to deal with regularly as researchers. So that's why they are there on that list, even though it might not be immediately obvious. Now, just lastly, before we get into Evernote, which is the first one I'll cover, this is very much a taster session only. So this isn't how-to. I'm not expecting people will be sitting there following along. And we're not going to be going into any of the 4 in depth. What I hope to do is just give you a little bit of a flavour as to what some of the functionality is and what some of the options are for you if you're interested in using any of these 4. So we'll kick off with introducing Evernote. If you're not familiar with Evernote, it's a sort of cloud-based application that allows you to store information. Now, I've been using it for about 5 years, and I never cease to be totally amazed by how much simpler it makes my life. Word of warning if you're new to it, when I first came across it, I didn't quite see the usefulness of it. Thought I'd give it a try. Lots of people had ranted and raved to me about it, but when I first set up an account, I actually couldn't quite see the point. And I think one of the issues with Evernote is you don't necessarily see how useful it is until you get a decent amount of information in it. So in the early days of using it, people do have a tendency to give up just because there's not enough information to make it useful for their lives. Now, before I jump into the software itself, I want to just talk briefly about what the building blocks of Evernote are. So the main building block of Evernote is something called a note, and notes represent the information that you wish to store. Now, notes can be quite a wide range of different things, and I'm just going to bring up what some of the options are. So it's just coming up on your screen now. Some of my favourites are web page snapshots, so being able to very quickly grab information from a web page. And I also love the ability to take photographs from within the Evernote app and have them automatically come into my account. The range of different types of information you can include in your Evernote account is definitely one of my favourite things. Now, notes can be organised in a couple of different ways. So notes can be organised in Evernote notebooks, and if you think of notebooks, they're just like a folder on your computer. I'm sure you all use folders yourselves in terms of your everyday computer work. Well, an Evernote notebook is pretty much the same thing. And they can also be tagged, and think of tags like keywords. So they're a way of describing the type of information in your account. So now that I've introduced you to the building blocks, let's jump across to Evernote itself.